Hey, welcome on in here, guys. Tobin here with you, and thanks for checking out the channel. If you guys could subscribe, that'd be great. Appreciate you stopping by. Also, check out the Tobin and Leroy Show, weekdays 10 a.m. to 2 p.m. That's on the 560 WQAM page, and you guys can check us out there live. You can interact on the chat. We get all kinds of silly. That is in the description. The handle's there. Click there. You find all my friends. Most of our stuff's on the live page. You click on the live tab if you want to watch archives of shows, or you can subscribe to the Tobin and Leroy podcast, available for you on all podcast platforms. It's right there for you, baby. You got tons of content every single day coming at you. Got Miami Heat, kind of in the midst of a malaise right now, but there's a lot of reaction nationally, a lot of rankings, and a lot of critiques of the Miami Heat front office that are out there, and it doesn't feel great. So the ESPN did a piece, right? And they ranked the worst mistakes by each team since 2020. And the Miami Heat, they did 5 tiers. Miami Heat are in tier 2 and have been, by this individual, what was this guy's name? Zach Cram. He has the Miami Heat as having the 12th worst mistake in NBA from the last 5 years. And he writes that their biggest mistake is trading for Terry Rozier, which is almost 3 moves in one. So I can't actually get mad at Zach here. I feel like this is a fair critique. If I were to look over the last 5 years and look at the moves that the Miami Heat have made, the only other argument really is not extending Jimmy Butler and making him happy, and that kind of nuking that happening. And I guess you can't have a non-move as your worst move, not getting Damian Lillard. So I would agree. I would say that is arguably one of the worst moves in franchise history, let alone the last 5 years. But Zach writes, despite his reputation for major star hunting, Heat major domo Pat. Hey, in the words of Tyler Hero, Zach, that's a big word for me, dog. Heat major domo Pat Riley isn't a reckless trader. Rather, he typically pulls the trigger only on game-changing moves. To wit, over the past 15 years, the only players the Heat have acquired while trading first-round picks are LeBron James, Chris Bosh, Goran Dragic, Jimmy Butler, and Terry Rozier. It's a great point by Zach. It reeked of desperation. It's not that Terry Rozier wasn't a sound player. The one thing I just keep going back to is, like, who were they bidding against for this guy that they had to throw that in? Like, how desperate and hard up against it were the Heat? You did have Tyler Hero injured at that point. You didn't get Damian Lillard. You were kind of trying to get Jimmy some support. But, man, what an overpay. And LeBron, Chris Bosh, hey, those were first-round picks. Not as chic to have first-round picks back then, but you were getting the big 3. And the whole point of it from their standpoint was, instead of getting him into cap space, the Heat, they wanted to get extra years on the extension, which they did not end up getting to use anyway. So, those were, Jimmy Butler, obviously worth the pick. And Goran Dragic was 2 first-round picks. And obviously that move didn't really get to bear fruit until Jimmy Butler got here, where they almost traded Goran beforehand. But all in all, Terry Rozier obviously stands out. And as Zach writes, the first 4 of those players made all-star teams, helped lead Miami to the finals. Rozier, conversely, averaged 12.5 points on 40% shooting, didn't appear in a single playoff game, fell out of Eric Spoelstra's rotation, and became embroiled in a federal gambling investigation. Phew. Making matters worse in the big picture, Rozier is represented the Heat's last big swing to give Butler another co-star before he asked out of Miami. Now they're stuck with no obvious path back to relevance, and they still owe a future first rounder to the Hornets as payment for Rozier. All of that is completely fair criticism. But man, you talk about some of the moves that the Heat are. These are some of the moves that the Heat are around. You have the Raptors right above them at 11 for trading first-round picks for role players. Jakob Poeltl, Brandon Ingram, Thaddeus Young, Ochai Agbaji, and Kelly Olynyk. Not for high first-rounders, though, to be fair. I honestly think the Heat should probably be higher than that. The Sixers committing $399 million to Paul George and Joel Embiid. The Bulls trade in for Nikola Vucevic in 2021. Man. What was that? Was that for 2 first-round picks too? I feel like that was for 2 first-round picks. Yeah. Grizzlies trading for Marcus Smart. 2 first-round picks and Tyus Jones. Understood, but I mean, they were in still a better spot. Like, I kind of get why they did it. I think it's arguable the Terry Rozier trade's worse than that. I think it's arguable. Then they get to the DeJounte Murray. The DeJounte Murray Atlanta Hawks one, although the Hawks seem like in a good place now. It actually has the Pelicans and the Hawks both trading for DeJounte Murray. That's tough for DeJounte Murray, who's obviously, come back from injury right now. And then it said, and those were all those in tier 2. And then you get into tier 1, which is like Halliburton getting traded for DeMontis Sabonis, the Nets trading James Harden, the Bucks trading for Damian Lillard, the Sixers, and which honestly, the Bucks trading for Damian Lillard is also almost kind of with the Heat. So according to this piece, like, are the Heat, they're in the ether of having 2 of the worst moves in the 2020s according to ESPN, which also the Miami Heat, right outside 2020, they made the trade for Jimmy Butler. That wasn't in 2020, with their only moves. They gave an extension they gave a big deal to Kyle Lowry, which was a sign and trade. PJ Tucker, like nothing that was too earth shattering. Just kind of felt like everybody was waiting for them in the 2020s to do any of these things. Like their number 2, trading for Kevin Durant and Bradley Beal. That was the number 2 on the list. And then trading Luka Doncic was number 1. I mean, that's obvious for the Mavericks. I think that's obvious as one of the worst moves. The things that were below them, they got like the Rockets drafting Jalen Green over Evan Mobley. Hornets signing Gordon Hayward, 4 years, $120 million. Utah not trading Larry Markkinen. Yeah, like all in all, it's looked upon like the Heat's looked upon as it's one of the worst moves that's maybe not even involving like an all-NBA guy that went awry. It's like a fringe top 10 worst move of the last 5 years and arguably the worst move. And it deserves all the criticism that it gets. And right now for the Heat, I'm not, you got to just kind of go about this controversy or no controversy. I think the Heat have signaled they're not into trying to make that work with the Norman Powell trade, with the Davion Mitchell re-signing, with the drafting of Kasparas Giacochonis. But man, it does feel like one, like it's gonna until that payment is done to the Hornets, it's gonna sting. It's going to sting. And this comes on the heels of CBS ranking Miami's front office 13th in the league. 13th, behind the Clippers, behind the Timberwolves, behind the Grizzlies, behind the Sixers. All right, dude. Who did this piece? Utah Jazz. All right, dude. What have the Sixers done? I mean, the Sixers and the Jazz. Like, I know everybody's got a pants tent for Morey and Danny Ainge, but do tell. I mean, what did this Utah Jazz do? Botch getting the number 1 pick and draft a guy who doesn't want to be there? Bully for them. How do they have this? Whatever. Either way, I'm not sitting here saying the Heat deserve their flowers right now. They certainly don't. And I actually think it's crazy to think that like Miami has become mid-Ami with just how everybody just thinks how mid they have been with all of their moves. And they had the Heat ranked 4th, I guess, the last time they did these front office rankings. And now they have them 13th. It said Miami's top 4 rank in February was based on track record. With the benefit of hindsight, probably too high. Miami is among the smartest team for 3 decades, but the last few years have raised serious questions. Pat Riley mishandling Jimmy Butler, challenging him through the media rather than extending or trading him. Sure enough, that led to a mess of a season. and an underwhelming trade return. I actually don't think that he did too bad on the Jimmy Butler front. Like, if you want to give the tentacles of the deal leading to the Norman Powell deal, I really don't think the Heat did too bad for the Jimmy Butler trade, but it did nuke a season. And, the Heat twice, believed too much in Jimmy Butler. They believed too much that Jimmy Butler could just flip the switch and become a superhero 2 years ago when they made the Terry Rozier trade. And then this year, they just believed that he would just play out and be professional. I'm not saying Jimmy's blameless in that. You should be a professional, and he was not. But their faith that this would just kind of all be okay was definitely misguided from them, and so they do deserve that. Recent draft picks have been somewhat of a mixed bag. Kel'el Ware looks like a keeper. I think the Heat's draft track record pretty strong. The Terry Rozier trade has been an outright disaster. Totally fair. They've been a play-in team for 3 years. They were not a below-average starting point guard away from winning anything. They lost the first-round pick. It's literally like one of those things. It's like a wart on your face. It's like having like a look. Imagine like I had this nose, but also had like a witch's mole on it, and then I have to make that like a Tinder profile. And I'm not getting any swipes. Not that I would anyway with a nose at full front at peak condition. But I'm just saying, like it's just it's like literally like the Heat's Tinder account right now just has they traded a first round pick for Terry Rozier. So what's concerning here is the overall vision feels outdated. The Heat appear far too comfortable being mediocre. They would probably prefer the term patient. In the late 2000s, they were comfortable punting away the last 2 seasons to create the cap space. Between 16, 17, 18, 19, they went from 2 games above 500 and in a holding pattern until Jimmy Butler forced his way, fell into their lap. Now they seem to be acting similarly. That's roughly a 500 team, has limited long-term upside, and they're waiting for another star to choose them. Hard to argue with Sam Quinn there. I think I will say I was talking about this with my buddy today about Pat Riley, and he was talking about the ideas like, oh, do you think this is like the lowest Pat Riley has been from a reputation standpoint? I said probably because I do think a lot of people were fueled by Team Petty after LeBron left, and mind you, they were pretty recently off championships, so there's a lot of shine there and belief that the Goran Dragic stuff that was talked about in the ESPN piece was going to pay off. You still believed in Pat Riley being able to build it and try and beat LeBron James to getting to a championship. Still, as it may seem right now, that is how a lot of people felt. You had some unfortunate things break their way, like the Chris Bosh blood clots. I think his moves in that time are arguably worse than they are now, Terry Rozier aside, because I do think a lot of it was fueled, especially when you got to the 2016 cap space of maxing out Whiteside, $50 million to Tyler Johnson, and then you talk about bringing in that 500 team that had looked like it was going to tanking, then finished 500, just missed the playoffs, and then they invested in all those guys, and you kind of just I just don't think the organization was ever at a point where they believed their own hype ever more so than that, and all of those contracts really just ended up looking terrible. Somehow they were able to work their way out of it, get Jimmy Butler and get Hassan out the door. James Johnson, who was suspended before the season, and Dion Waiters, they basically had to be forced in games injured to go play them. But then eventually they were both flipped to Memphis, and the Heat got pieces for that bubble run. But I felt like Pat Riley was acting more irrationally back then than he is now. I think the question now is, like, when you talk about direction of the team, they're very clearly hopeful that either Bam or Tyler takes a step up. And there is a hope that Kel'el or Nikola Jovic, one of those guys, ticks up. Maybe Jaime Jaquez is a big bounce back. And then the hope is that you have those young guys with your younger all-stars have a better supporting cast of a comfortable Andrew Wiggins and a Norm Powell. In an East, can it get out of the play-in on all? I think it can. But the question is that really, like, is the peak of that winning a round of the playoffs. Probably, unless you got like the best 2 draws. And that's just not the standard of the organization. So then what? Where does it go from here? Those are the things that you really have to know. It says stars don't work that way anymore. They don't move through free agency. The Heat haven't traded for a star who was under contract since 2004 when they landed Shaquille O'Neal. The market has never mattered less than it does right now. De'Aaron Fox, Bam's teammate, just forced his way to San Antonio because he knew Victor Wembanyama was his best chance to compete for a championship. Now you either have to draft your stars or stack up enough assets to trade for them. He's not helping themselves by hanging around 500 instead of accepting defeat in this era and tanking. They're not helping themselves by wasting assets on a player like Rozier. Yeah, I mean, there's not much to argue there. They don't believe in tanking. They won't believe in tanking unless it's like literally smacking them in the face or there's a catastrophic injury to one of their top 2 dudes. I just don't think they're ever going to go in that direction. Tanking hasn't seemed like it's paid off for the big prize recently. It has paid off on some pieces for guys just to miss the playoffs and get into lottery. I understand why the Heat didn't want to go for 2 first-round picks and then leave themselves unprotected this year, because if the Heat didn't have their first-round pick this year, then you really do have to kind of float in this mid-range. Maybe something crazy would happen and they would have gotten Cooper Flagg. I doubt it, because it feels very much like that was rigged. But let's just say it wasn't. It still was a 1.8% chance, and those just aren't fantastic odds. So it's great. It's tough. I get why the doubt is there. It says the days of Pat Riley dropping his rings on the table and landing whoever he wants appear to be over. The league is changing, and it's not clear that the Heat are changing with it. So yeah, that's where not a lot of faith that's going on right there. And look, man, the Heat, they are deserving of a lot of this criticism. They did make a good trade for Norman Powell, so big time props. But you do have people who are skeptical. You look at the Mike Millers of the world or Shaquille O'Neal who are like, yeah, it's a nice move, but it's not a Pat Riley harpoon. You know, it's a nice catch. You know, you happen to be out there chumming and you caught yourself a mahi-mahi, but you haven't sharpened the harpoons and landed the whale in a long time. You haven't even tried to target. It's like you haven't even tried to target. It's kind of like, should I throw the harpoon? What if it capsizes our boat? That's kind of how the Heat have gone about this. The thing is, I do like a lot of the young pieces. I really do. I think it's good that they have a better foundational support around it. And then the other thing is, like, there weren't a ton of levers to pull. Giannis hasn't asked out yet. Certainly want to see what ends up happening with Luka, though I imagine he's going to sign somewhat of an extension with the Lakers to give him some breathing room. So I don't think that's going to flame out just yet. I guess we could still throw the LeBron stuff to be a thing until it's not a thing. In the middle of the season, could the Ja thing resurface? Was that what Mike Miller was talking about? This is agent. Does New Orleans finally tap out on Zion? These are all things that you do have to wonder. And the Heat do have, contracts to make a move. And then it does feel like everybody knows that people are trying to now hold on to their picks with all of their life. So maybe they'll be in a better position of not having to give up the farm, because that's usually how the Heat like it. They usually like to get their guy, and they like to usually get them at their price. Even going back to Jimmy, back in the original negotiation of Jimmy Butler with the Timberwolves, remember how that all went, where like very heated negotiations, maybe expletives flying back and forth between Riley and Thibodeau. Some of those rumors have been shot down, but eventually the Heat got their guy at their price. But Jimmy's the only one who's really, when they got the bargain price, it's really exceeded expectations. I'm not counting the big, since post Big Three, it exceeded expectations. Even Goran went through his own trials and tribulations of playing through a knee injury, Pat Riley calling him out. He's talked about this. And it wasn't as immediately, bang, he got here and things took off. And in fact, Goron really didn't get that opportunity until he got to that season with Jimmy Butler, which again was a year where he was six-man most of the regular season. And then once the bubble got there, he was amazing till his foot blew up. So maybe things break better for the Heat this year. It'd be hard to imagine things breaking worse for them. But there do need to be fixes. I do like that Spo talked about, fixing the late game issues and the oven. It's just great to talk about. Does this mastermind, who is regarded as one of the best coaches in the league, does he have those answers? But right now, man, everybody's just kind of just looking at him and being like, I guess we won't count you out because you are the Heat, but like, the cachet has worn off for a lot of people with them. So they got to get to start proving people wrong.